I'm sure there are things I could do better. I'm sure there are things I could have said better.
Joni Lamb just got the shock of her life as viewers turn on her after her recent interview. What was meant to be a candid conversation has quickly spiraled into a nightmare, with audiences expressing their disbelief and disappointment. The backlash has been swift and intense, leaving Joni's reputation hanging by a thread. What did she say that has everyone questioning her? Tune in to find out why this interview could be a career-altering moment for Joni Lamb. Joni Lamb's recent emotional interview was supposed to be her chance at repairing her image after months of negative attention. She appeared on live television, addressing the growing controversy surrounding her personal and professional life, with a dramatic caption that promised to reveal the real Joni Lamb. The interview was billed as a damage control mission, a way for Joni to take control of the narrative and show the world the woman behind the headlines. It was clear from the start that this wasn't just another casual conversation. Joni was trying to rebuild her reputation and soften the public's perception of her. The interview, however, did not go as planned. Joni spent most of the time carefully crafting her narrative, portraying herself as a woman of faith who had faced adversity and risen above it. She spoke about her childhood, her faith, and her journey of overcoming obstacles, painting herself as someone who had always turned to God for guidance. But as the interview continued, it became evident that she was doing more than just sharing her story. She was attempting to control the image people had of her, framing her actions and decisions in a way that painted her as a victim of circumstances. Joni's attempts to frame herself as a woman who had fought spiritual battles and remained steadfast in her faith didn't sit well with many viewers. They could see through the polished narrative she was presenting, especially when it came to the most difficult and controversial parts of her life. One of the most glaring issues was her remarriage to Doug Weiss just months after the death of her husband, Marcus Lamb. While Joni talked about her grief and the process of moving forward, many viewers couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. The quick turnaround between mourning her husband and marrying someone else raised questions that Joni avoided answering. Instead of addressing the real issues that had been plaguing her and Daystar, Joni focused on her past and her faith, as if that would excuse her more recent actions. She tried to convince everyone that the reason she moved on so quickly was because of God's plan, claiming that it was part of her divine journey. But the timing and the circumstances surrounding her remarriage just didn't add up, and viewers began to question whether her emotional responses were genuine or simply a calculated attempt to cover up the truth. Joni's emotional breakdown during the interview also seemed staged. She cried as she spoke about her life with Marcus, but it felt as if the tears were more about salvaging her public image than about truly grieving. She was trying to project an image of strength, but it was clear that she was struggling to balance the weight of her personal decisions with the pressure of public scrutiny. The more she tried to present herself as a victim, the more disconnected she seemed from the reality of the situation. By the end of the interview, Joni had failed to repair her image. Instead of winning over her critics, she alienated even more people by refusing to address the serious allegations against her and the network. Her focus on her personal narrative, without addressing the core issues that had led to the controversy, left viewers feeling frustrated. The interview was supposed to be a moment of redemption, but instead it became another public relations disaster that only deepened the divide between Joni and her audience. It was clear that the real Joni Lamb had yet to be revealed. Joni Lamb's attempt to craft her narrative during the recent interview was a calculated move to regain control of her image after months of mounting controversy. It was obvious from the start that she wasn't there just to have a simple conversation. This was a damage control mission. As the interview began, Joni was poised, carefully composed, and ready to present herself in a light that she hoped would shine brighter than the storm clouds surrounding her. The interview was titled "The Real Joni Lamb," a phrase designed to draw viewers in, promising a deeper look at her life and the woman behind the headlines. But as the conversation unfolded, it quickly became clear that this was less about revealing the real Joni and more about shaping the narrative to fit her desired image. Joni began by talking about her childhood, her upbringing, and her early faith journey. She spoke about how, from a young age, she had felt the hand of God in her life, guiding her towards a path of purpose. She recounted a story from her teen years about a relationship she had with someone who, she realized, wasn't right for her. In typical Joni style, she framed this experience as a pivotal moment where she turned to God for help. "I wrote a letter to God," she said, as if that moment of reflection was a crucial turning point that shaped her future. In the letter, she expressed her desire to live in God's will, and somehow, everything fell into place after that. Joni's use of the letter to God narrative was not new. It echoed similar stories told by others in the Christian community who have had moments of divine revelation, where they feel as though their life's course is suddenly set in stone by a higher power. It's a familiar trope, one that not only appeals to religious audiences, but also helps to position her as someone who has always been obedient to God's plan. From there, the conversation shifted to her relationship with Marcus Lamb, her late husband, and the founding of Daystar television. Joni's words were filled with reverence and love for Marcus. She spoke about the deep connection they shared, the vision they had for Daystar, and the sacrifices they made to build the network into what it had become. Joni described how the network was not just a ministry, but a labor of love, something that had been built with faith, hard work, and a shared sense of purpose. "Marcus and I dreamed of spreading God's message," she said with a nostalgic tone, as though recalling a simpler time when everything seemed to be going according to plan. For Joni, the network was more than just a business. It was a testament to the vision she and Marcus had shared, and the work they had done to create something that would impact millions. But as the interview went on, the cracks in Joni's crafted narrative began to show. She spoke about Marcus's passing and her grief, but there was an undeniable gap between her words and the actions that followed. Joni claimed she grieved for 6 months, but viewers were quick to point out the discrepancies in her timeline. According to her own admission, she had booked a honeymoon for herself and Doug Weiss, her new husband, less than 10 months after Marcus's death. The timeline didn't add up, and viewers couldn't ignore the fact that Joni seemed to have moved on rather quickly, given how deeply she claimed to have grieved. The honeymoon was booked before her engagement to Doug was even officially announced, and that raised serious questions. Was Joni truly grieving? Or was this all part of a carefully crafted story she was trying to sell? As the interview continued, Joni's attempts to craft her narrative became more apparent. She kept emphasizing how she was a woman of faith who had faced challenges and overcome them with God's guidance. She was positioning herself as a strong, resilient leader, someone who had weathered the storms of life and emerged victorious. But this message was in stark contrast to the allegations surrounding her and the network. While Joni was presenting herself as a faithful and strong woman, viewers were aware of the whispers and rumors that had been circulating for months about her personal life and Daystar's internal struggles. The allegations of a cover-up, the accusations of financial mismanagement, and the controversial issues regarding her remarriage to Doug Weiss were all being glossed over, as if they didn't matter in the face of her narrative of divine guidance and personal strength. Joni's careful control of the conversation didn't stop there. She was asked about the public scrutiny she had been facing, especially after the leaked audio recordings of Jonathan Lamb, her son, which had revealed a side of Joni that many had never seen before. Instead of addressing the real issues head-on, Joni deflected, claiming that she didn't listen to the podcasts or watch the YouTube videos that had been circulating. "I haven't watched one podcast," she said, almost dismissively. "I haven't watched one YouTube that would have you know lies or half-truths." This response was troubling to many viewers, especially since it was widely known that Joni's team had been involved in making response videos to these same YouTube videos. If she wasn't watching these videos, how was she approving response content? It seemed like a clear contradiction. Joni's insistence that she wasn't paying attention to the backlash didn't sit well with those who knew better. It felt like she was trying to present herself as someone above the drama while still controlling the narrative behind the scenes. The interview continued in the same vein, Joni presenting herself as a victim of adversity while carefully avoiding the tougher questions that had been raised about her actions. Instead of taking full responsibility for the controversies surrounding her and Daystar, Joni continued to paint herself as a woman who had been wronged, someone who had been misunderstood and misrepresented. But this approach didn't resonate with the audience. Instead of making her more relatable, it made her seem distant and disconnected from the real issues at hand. Her polished answers, rehearsed emotions, and carefully constructed narrative felt more like a PR move than a genuine attempt to open up and address the concerns of the public. The entire interview was a clear attempt by Joni Lamb to control her public image, but it ended up doing more harm than good. While she may have hoped to show herself as a woman of strength and faith, the glaring contradictions in her story left viewers questioning her authenticity. The discrepancies in her grieving process, the timing of her remarriage, and her dismissive attitude toward the allegations all contributed to a growing sense of distrust. Joni's attempt to craft her narrative may have been a strategic move, but it ultimately backfired, leaving more questions unanswered and reinforcing the skepticism surrounding her actions. Joni Lamb's recent interview, intended to repair her image, quickly turned into a public relations disaster. Instead of winning over the viewers and addressing the serious allegations surrounding her, it left many more questions unanswered. The backlash from viewers was swift, and they wasted no time in expressing their disappointment. This wasn't the redemption story Joni had hoped for. Instead, it only highlighted the gaps in her narrative, raising more concerns than it resolved. One of the biggest issues that viewers had with the interview was the lack of accountability. Joni spent a great deal of time framing herself as a victim of adversity, a woman of faith who had been misunderstood by the public. While she spoke at length about her spiritual journey and the challenges she faced in her personal life, she failed to directly address the most pressing concerns: the allegations about Daystar, her quick remarriage to Doug Weiss, and the leaked audio recordings of her son, Joni Lamb. Viewers felt that Joni was dodging the tough questions and instead offered rehearsed responses aimed at preserving her image as a strong and resilient leader. But the more she spoke, the more it seemed like she was avoiding the elephant in the room. The leaked audio recordings of Joni Lamb, Joni's son, had already revealed a side of Joni that most people had never seen before. In these recordings, Joni exposed some of the tensions and disagreements within the Lamb family, including Joni's actions that he felt were manipulative and self-serving. Joni's allegations were serious and for many cast doubt on the public image Joni had carefully crafted over the years. Yet in her interview, Joni barely touched on these recordings. She claimed she hadn't watched any of the podcasts or YouTube videos that had been circulating, yet it was clear that her team had been involved in making response videos. This contradiction didn't sit well with the audience, and many were quick to call her out on it. How could she claim to be above the drama, yet still engage with it behind the scenes? Her refusal to address the recordings and the allegations directly only served to fuel the suspicion that she had something to hide. Another issue that left viewers dissatisfied was the way Joni handled the topic of her remarriage to Doug Weiss. Joni had been married to Marcus Lamb for decades, and his death was a significant moment in both her personal life and the Daystar network's history. Yet, just months after Marcus's passing, Joni married Doug Weiss, a man she had known for years but had only recently become romantically involved with. Joni claimed in the interview that she grieved for 6 months after Marcus's death, but the timeline didn't add up. How could someone who claimed to be grieving so deeply turn around and marry someone else so quickly? Viewers couldn't ignore the contradictions in her story. Joni had spoken about her deep emotional connection to Marcus and how their work at Daystar was a shared vision. But she didn't address the fact that she was already planning her future with Doug before Marcus's death was even a distant memory. The quick turnaround between mourning her husband and marrying Doug left many feeling that her grief was either exaggerated or entirely fabricated. What made matters worse was Joni's defensive tone when it came to the criticisms she had faced. She dismissed the concerns of her viewers as lies and half-truths, refusing to acknowledge the validity of the accusations against her. Instead, she positioned herself as a victim of people who were simply trying to tear her down. Her response to the backlash felt dismissive, as if she wasn't truly taking the concerns of her audience seriously. Rather than offering a genuine apology or attempting to explain herself, she chose to deflect, which only added fuel to the fire. Viewers felt that Joni was not taking responsibility for her actions, instead deflecting the blame onto others. The more Joni spoke, the more it became clear that she wasn't willing to open up about the things that mattered most. She focused on telling hand-picked stories that painted her as a strong woman of faith, yet she ignored the real issues at hand. For instance, when asked about the financial struggles and the alleged cover-ups at Daystar, Joni deflected, choosing to talk about her personal journey instead. This only served to frustrate viewers who had hoped that the interview would provide some clarity about the controversies surrounding her and the network. Instead, it felt like she was using her platform to spin a tale of personal triumph, leaving the real questions unanswered. As the interview ended, the backlash from viewers only intensified. People were frustrated, angry, and confused. Many felt that Joni had wasted an opportunity to address the real issues and clear the air. Instead of apologizing or explaining her actions, she had once again tried to protect her image. The comments section exploded with criticism, with many viewers accusing her of being dishonest and manipulative. Some pointed out the glaring contradictions in her story, while others expressed their disappointment at how she had handled the entire situation. For them, it wasn't just about the allegations. It was about the way Joni had tried to control the narrative and avoid accountability. In the aftermath of the interview, Joni's attempt to repair her image had failed miserably. Rather than winning back supporters or clearing the air, she had only deepened the divide. The leaked recordings, the quick remarriage, and the refusal to address the serious allegations left viewers questioning her integrity. The interview, instead of being a moment of redemption, had turned into a PR disaster. Joni's refusal to be transparent, her attempts to manipulate the narrative, and her unwillingness to face the hard truths only made things worse. For many, the interview was a turning point, a moment when they saw the real Joni Lamb, and it wasn't the woman they had once admired. Instead, they were left with more questions than answers and a deep sense of betrayal. Joni Lamb's recent public denial of the allegations surrounding her has sparked even more controversy, leaving many wondering if the truth is really as simple as she claims. For months, the Lamb family has been under scrutiny, particularly with the allegations made by Jonathan and Susie Lamb and the leaked audio recordings that exposed troubling details about Joni's actions. These recordings, which portrayed Joni in a way that contradicted her carefully crafted public image, set off a storm of questions and doubts about her integrity and the way she handled certain situations. In her latest interview, Joni was asked about the allegations and the growing criticism of her leadership at Daystar. She wasted no time in denying the accusations, claiming that everything said about her was false and baseless. She dismissed the accusations as part of a smear campaign, calling the allegations a complete fabrication and accusing those behind them of attempting to destroy her and her family. This denial, however, only served to fuel the fire rather than put it out. For many who had been following the story, Joni's response felt like an attempt to dodge the real issues at hand, avoiding any real discussion of the facts or the underlying problems that had been raised. One of the main allegations Joni faced was regarding the cover-up of sexual abuse involving her granddaughter. According to Jonathan and Susie, there had been a history of sexual abuse within the Lamb family that had been swept under the rug. They alleged that Joni and her late husband, Marcus, had hidden the truth about the abuse, which had been happening under their roof. These claims were made even more alarming by the fact that the family had allegedly known about the abuse but had failed to take proper action. Joni, however, denied these allegations outright, stating that she had no knowledge of any such incidents and that the accusations were completely false. Despite her firm denials, many viewers and critics weren't buying it. The fact that Jonathan and Susie, as well as other family members, had spoken out about the abuse gave their claims a sense of weight that Joni's denial could not easily shake off. Joni's refusal to address the specific details of the allegations only deepened the suspicion surrounding her. People began to question why she wasn't being more transparent, especially considering the gravity of the accusations. Instead of directly addressing the issue and offering some kind of explanation or reassurance, Joni chose to deflect, sticking to her narrative of victimhood. Another layer to the controversy came with the question of financial misconduct. As the scandal surrounding Daystar grew, allegations of financial mismanagement began to surface, with some people claiming that funds had been misused and funneled into personal expenses. One of the most shocking claims was the alleged use of ministry funds for Joni's honeymoon with Doug. Documents surfaced showing that Joni had charged a significant amount to the ministry's credit card, raising questions about whether or not the trip was appropriate or ethical. Joni firmly denied these claims, stating that she had paid for the trip out of her own pocket and that the charges had been cleared up. However, the timing of the honeymoon, which came so soon after Marcus's death, left many people wondering if Joni was truly grieving or if the whole thing had been an act. Joni's defensive tone during the interview only added to the frustration felt by many viewers. Instead of offering a clear and honest explanation, she continued to claim that the accusations were part of a smear campaign against her and Daystar. She also implied that those who were questioning her actions had ulterior motives, trying to discredit her and take down the network. This sense of paranoia and defensiveness made it difficult for viewers to trust her version of events. Her inability to show any real remorse or empathy for those involved in the allegations, or even to acknowledge the gravity of the situation, left many people feeling alienated. The more Joni denied, the more the controversy grew. Social media exploded with opinions, with many people voicing their disappointment and frustration over her responses. The interview was supposed to be her chance to clear the air and rebuild her reputation, but instead, it only seemed to cement the idea that she was not being fully transparent. People were particularly bothered by her refusal to engage with the specifics of the allegations, instead sticking to vague generalizations that painted her as the victim. Moreover, Joni's denial of the allegations put a significant strain on Daystar itself. The network, which had once been a trusted source of Christian programming, found itself entangled in the mess of scandal and denial. The public had always looked up to Daystar as a symbol of faith and integrity. But now, with the Lamb family at the center of so much controversy, that image was beginning to crumble. Viewers who had supported the network for years began to question whether they could continue to trust it, especially when the leadership seemed so unwilling to address the serious issues being raised. The fallout from the allegations reached far beyond just Joni and her family. It was impacting the entire organization. The ongoing drama surrounding Joni Lamb and Daystar was a reminder of the complicated nature of public figures and the pressure they face when their private lives are scrutinized. For Joni, the attempt to deny the allegations and shift the blame only created more tension. Rather than offering a candid apology or taking responsibility for her actions, she chose to close ranks and defend her reputation, even at the cost of further alienating those who were already skeptical. The more she denied, the more questions arose, and the harder it became to trust what she was saying. In the end, Joni Lamb's attempt to deny the allegations did little to quell the growing controversy. Instead, it only fueled more speculation and distrust. Viewers wanted answers, but Joni's refusal to provide them left the situation unresolved. The unanswered questions about the abuse, the finances, and her relationship with Doug Weiss hung in the air, unanswered and unexplained. While Joni may have hoped her denial would put an end to the controversy, it only seemed to make things worse, leaving people with more doubts than before. As the fallout continued to unfold, it was clear that Joni's efforts to repair her reputation were far from over.